Don't be distracted at all. I'm going to remain focused, because at the end of the next 4 or 5 years, we must be on the side of victory. We must be on the side of victory for Jamaica. This is outside of the Jamaica Labour Party. This is the Jamaica. This is Jamaica, because as I tell you, the world is quietly closing its door to us. And we have an opportunity. You listen to me, people. We have an opportunity to get it right. For the first time, I was born in the 70s. And between the 70s, I was born, and 80s, I knew we never had it right in Jamaica. And we struggled through the 80s. Things were not bad. But when it touched the 90s, I knew it wasn't right. And finally, talk truth. Shame the devil. You don't feel it. You're a Jamaican, whether in Jamaica or overseas. Don't you feel a sense that finally Jamaica is getting it right? Don't you feel like that? You know, feel, say, finally we are taming the crime beast. Yes. And we appear as if we are making some progress. Finally. That must be preserved. That's what Mr. Dobney was talking about last night. It must be preserved. Forget the politics, man. Take off your orange shirt and look at your country. Look at your country. Because me, I tell you no, you know, that if we don't have another chance. Scratchy?
Blessed night, neighbor, Caroline, and viewers.
Scratchy, you don't agree with that. We don't have another chance, Scratchy. This is it. If we don't get it done now, Scratchy, when it's going to happen?
We'll never see it happen again, neighbor. It's neither now or never, neighbor. It's either now or never. If it don't happen now, neighbor, Jamaica gone to the doom.
Yeah, it is very important, you know, Scratchy. I don't know if you were listening to Mr. Dobney last night. Were you listening to him, sir?
For a short period, I left at some point. I got a phone call.
Yeah, Scratchy. I think what the point Dobney was trying to make was, when you look at the leadership that we have available to us in Jamaica, Scratchy, on the PNP side, on the Jamaica Labour Party side, Wholeness is miles ahead of everybody.
Definitely, neighbor. Miles ahead of everybody, neighbor.
Yeah, and as a result of that, Scratchy, Jamaica ought to preserve this man. This man needs support.
Definitely, neighbor. All the support that he can get, neighbor. I mean, whatever most of us achieve in this time, neighbor, for personal, neighbor, it is a result of Jamaica Wholeness.
Yeah. And then Mr. Dobney speaks of the legacy, Scratchy, that somehow he feels that the party is not doing enough to ensure that the PNP is kept out. He feels that the PNP is appearing to gain too much strength, and he's disappointed because when he speaks of the performance of the Jamaica Labour Party, Scratchy, and he was fearful that somehow the PNP could move from 28, as I heard Mr. Golding, for example, on Perry talking about the PNP doubling their seats and they only need another 4 seats. So obviously what the PNP is doing is revealing their strategy, that what they are doing is targeting 4 seats. So what the PNP wants to do, Scratchy, is to hold on to their 28 and see if they can pick up 4 or 5. Mr. Dobney is saying that we must not allow that to happen, Scratchy.
I mean, definitely, neighbor. I don't think that is going to happen, neighbor, at this point, neighbor. When you look, neighbor, yeah, we can definitely say, neighbor, we can also attest that empty barrels made the most noise, neighbor. I would definitely agree that the PNP is making the most noise. Is it of any substance? Is it gaining any form of formal traction or any form of traction, neighbor, that can thwart development of the country or make investors, neighbor, second chance and second guess what their way forward towards the investment in Jamaica? Definitely not, neighbor. So when I look at the noise that is coming from the opposition, neighbor, and the PNP, neighbor, yes, it is very loud. It can be distracting to a certain level, neighbor, but no substance, neighbor. Just a bag of hooray and hype, neighbor. And I definitely don't think the PNP is gaining any form of attention or any form of traction. We're in a national disaster, a certain section of the island, neighbor. With the amount of money that the government has at its disposal, neighbor. Neighbor, come this mountain, neighbor, when these persons receive their checking in. It's a total different ball game, you know. One thing with Jamaicans, you know, we might cuss you, but when it's time to be grateful, neighbor, we're going to be grateful. And I expect, neighbor, that you're going to see a maximum shift towards the Jamaica Labour Party, and this is what the opposition has been fighting against, because they know, neighbor, the resources at the government disposal, neighbor, and they know that whether the government want to play politics or not, the people, neighbor, when time they get resources, they receive the resources, neighbor, they are the ones who look on it from a political standpoint. So government have a try, government duty is to just distribute, and the people know, neighbor, we have to now compare and say, compare to then, compare to now, is now. Come on, trust me, neighbor. It's a total different ball game going forward. I don't see them gaining any form of traction.
Yeah, you know, Scotty. When we started this program in March, I have had the benefit of being on here almost every day, talking to the listeners, and it has forced me to do a lot of reading, to do a lot of research. I try to prepare well to come on the program in the evenings. One of the things that has struck me, Scratchy, is that Jamaicans, almost it's psychological. Whenever you talk about the PNP returning to power, and this is not only a labor rights, Scratchy, there is a fear of the PNP regaining political office in Jamaica. Why is that? Why are people so afraid of them?
Neighbor, persons know, neighbor, the ability to can compare, neighbor. During 18 and a half consecutive years, neighbor, you don't have nothing to call. There's no form of comparison, neighbor, into knowing what other persons can do or what someone else can do. So we have seen on Jamaica loneliness now through the Jamaica Labour Party, neighbor, form a third-term government, neighbor, and persons are comparing this third-term, neighbor, and the development that they have seen in the country, neighbor. Not just development from an economical standpoint. Yes, we know that is the backbone, but tangible development, neighbor, things that each and every Jamaican citizen can participate in. All of us drive on the roads, neighbor, whether we have a personal vehicle, we use public transportation, neighbor, the roads still assist us, neighbor. So we must understand, neighbor, that persons can compare, neighbor, and persons are reminiscent of the fact, neighbor, and persons can look back to the 18 and a half years, neighbor. Even if you was a child at that time, neighbor, you can look at the hardship that your parents or your parents went through at that time, neighbor. And you can also compare right now.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yes, and you can ask, and these persons, neighbor, can also compare to now. And I can tell you, neighbor, 90% of Jamaica, neighbor, a majority, if not 90%, neighbor, can say that their living condition right now and their ability, neighbor, to take care of their children and send them to school is far better than their parents. It's far better than their parents, neighbor, and that is how you know a country has developed, neighbor. When you can look back and say, based on how I see my mama used to struggle and couldn't do this and couldn't do that, it is so easy for me now to do it to my child. Yeah, but I never went to prep school. I had to go to primary school. My kids go to prep school now.
Wow. So Scratchy, would you help me to speak then about preserving the legacy of the party that you support? How do we begin to protect the progress, Scratchy? To protect the progress. You know, Scratchy, this is personal, you know, and I know it's personal to you, it's personal to Caroline. Scratchy, we cannot afford to let go of the progress we have made. You know, Scratchy, when you look at the politics of the world, what's happening in America, what's happening even here in the Caribbean, we see what's happened over there in Venezuela. Scratchy, nobody owes us anything, you know. We have to billiard because this is what we have. You are over there in Canada, Scratchy. You don't know if somehow in the future the Canadian government will not say, well, you know, we don't want any non-nationals in our country.
Neighbor, all of us, neighbor, who are Jamaicans, neighbor, who have this awesome, neighbor, opportunity, neighbor, of owning a birth paper, neighbor, which say that you're a national of Jamaica, wherever in Jamaica you're born. We must have that part of, we must always hold that part in our brain, neighbor, whether we live inside or outside of Jamaica or in a diaspora, neighbor. We must also understand that the rock, neighbor, is where it truly belongs, neighbor. The rock is our fortress, neighbor. The rock is our backbone. The rock is our happy place, neighbor, because all of us who live in these places, neighbor, no matter how we're there, neighbor, we were sad at time, we in depression at time, but Jamaica is our happy place. So
Yes.
this is something, neighbor, that all of us, neighbor, must understand, neighbor, that we must also partake in the government and the development of this country, neighbor, and we must understand the importance of this country to us, neighbor, and we must make sure that we are totally, neighbor, in advancement of the welfare, neighbor, and the well-being of Jamaica, and help the government in any way that we can. And I would even further say, neighbor, that all of us, neighbor, when you talk about preserving, neighbor, we must understand that Jamaica is developing so rapidly, neighbor, that
Yes.
a lot of the aid that we used to get, neighbor, from these countries, neighbor, they're going to hold them back.
Right.
They're gonna hold them back, neighbor. I remember, all right, case in point, neighbor. If you even look on persons who use the public farm, public clinics in Jamaica, neighbor. One time I see people got clinic, neighbor, them could have come back with 100 condom. I don't live in Jamaica anymore, but I can tell you, neighbor, that when I person got to clinic now, neighbor, a 10 condom or 5 condom you get now, and there's an increase in sex. But the reason why the condom cut now, neighbor, is that the condom is not being given to Jamaica free again. Because of our economic development. We look at even the antiretroviral medication, neighbor, for persons with HIV and AIDS, neighbor. At one point in time, neighbor, there was a big discussion, neighbor, with PAHO, Pan-American Health Organization, neighbor, World Health Organization, neighbor, and the Jamaican government, neighbor, they were saying that it's time now for Jamaica start pay for this because we are no longer in certain economic frustration. We can start to fix these things.
A developing country.
We are considered a developing country, neighbor. Negotiation had to be going on and stuff. And HIV medication, it's free. So persons must know, neighbor, that that Jamaica is developed, neighbor. A lot of these countries, neighbor, are going to start to hold back on some of the aid that we are used to seeing flowing in. Where, case in point, the USA, we see where the American government cut USA, we can't do nothing about that. We see where the American government never puts up the restriction on the immigrant visa thing, we can't do nothing about that. Neighbor,
Yes.
some point is going to come, neighbor, where all of us must look to the rock and come and try to own a piece of the rock and let's start develop the rock, neighbor. I'm telling you, one Jamaica under one PM.
How do you think there are about 600 people listening to you right now, Scratchy? How do you think that we can build awareness and be involved to support the country? And by virtue of that, supporting the government, and I want to specifically say support the Prime Minister. You know, Scratchy, of the onset of disinformation, how it is tearing the country apart. How would you suggest that, especially Labour Party supporters, become more involved to preserve the gains we have made and to make sure, Scratchy, that we hold on to the reins of power, because ultimately you can't be in opposition and develop your country, can you?
Definitely, and neighbor, in any organization, neighbor, any company, any community, neighbor, we see where persons, neighbor, stand up and stand in solidarity with the persons, neighbor, who make it, who create the opportunities, neighbor, where these persons can survive. So when you look at even a company, neighbor, I see where persons are removing managers and then you see the workers come out and protest for that manager, neighbor, yes, because of this leadership style and how that manager makes them feel, neighbor. So I believe, neighbor, that in preserving Jamaica, neighbor, we must look at the CEO, neighbor. You know, look at the CEO, which is the Prime Minister right now, and say, okay, we must make sure that we protect him, we must make sure that we defend him, and we must make sure that we show him that much respect, because it is his policy, it is his vision, it is his creativity, and it is his idea that is benefiting us, all of us right now in this country.
All of us.
All of us, neighbor, whether we want to believe it or not, neighbor, whether you're a PNP, whether you're a JLP, whether you voted last election or whether you voted not, any advancement in your life is as a result of the policy, the program, the creativity of Andrew Michael Lowness and his cabinet.
Yes.
And persons must know that, neighbor. So persons who, neighbor, who might say no on go on the pay the government this and the government that, but in the same breath you manage to add on a bathroom on your room, you manage to add on an extra room on your that
buy a car.
You manage to buy a car, you manage to can buy 6 sardines instead of the 3 we used to buy.
Send your picnic to university.
Send your picnic to university, but you come and cost the government same now do nothing for you because why? You never directly get more money in your hand. You never directly get the 100 black them to build up the old kitchen where build the new one we build now. You never directly get one mattress. So not what you buy in your personal life, you don't feel like says as a result of the policies and program that the government put in. So persons neighbor, first thing they don't even know to show appreciation to some of these persons.
Yes.
And the first thing what we need to know is neighbor is that we must show appreciation. Being grateful neighbor, you only can get better. And trust me neighbor, all of us should be proud and honor neighbor. To know that Andrew Michael Owens is the current Prime Minister. One of the greatest things that I like to know that with Andrew Michael Owens is that we have all seen this man growing right in front of our eyes, neighbor.
Amazing strategy. I was forced today, based on what Mr. Dobney said to me last night, to go and listen to Mr. Holness. Scratchy, I have to tell you, I am convinced that Jamaica better hold on to him. He has come a far way, Scratchy. Let me tell you, I don't hear any better.
Neighbor, each and every single one of us has seen the transformation of Andrew Michael Wallace, neighbor, right before our eyes, neighbor. Right before our eyes, neighbor. Yeah, Minister, normal member of parliament, Minister of Education, neighbor, 38-year-old Prime Minister, young Prime Minister, neighbor. So might say him call a premature election, neighbor. He went to the polls, he did wear that basket, he had a lot of burden on him, he lost, neighbor, and we saw, neighbor, where Andrew Michael Wallace, neighbor, never just sit down and be a lame duck opposition leader, neighbor. He never just sit down, neighbor, and counter with misinformation and disinformation, neighbor. Yes. He studied the game, neighbor. He trained himself, neighbor. He did a lot of personal development, neighbor. And come 2016, neighbor, right before our eyes, neighbor, we saw much more mature Andrew Wallace, neighbor. Andrew Wallace, neighbor, who became a Prime Minister from 2016 till now, neighbor. And we have seen the advancement of this man, neighbor. This man has gone as far as, neighbor, has even gone in a doctorate. You know, I don't think we've ever had in a Prime Minister, neighbor, who while they were Prime Minister, neighbor, made any advancement in the educational level. So we must understand, neighbor, that even Dr. Wallace getting this doctorate or going back to school, neighbor, it never did anything. It never increased his salary, neighbor. It never increased his salary. It never do anything. It never do anything. But he still see it fit, neighbor, to go and get himself some form of higher level of education, neighbor, to know that yes, I am the Prime Minister, because he knew that was one of the main things that they were going to come with and attack him, you know. In medication level, saying just have a basic degree, and just stop right there. And he's now Dr. the Honorable Andrew Michael Wallace.
Yeah, fantastic. Scratchy, I'm gonna take you over to Westmoreland. You know of the government solidarity program, 20,000.
Yes, by the tune of $1 billion.
Yeah. Scratchy, do you know that Dayton Campbell launched it in his constituency today, and they had to call it off, the amount of people who showed up? I've never heard it like that. What's happening over there?
As I said, neighbor, Westmoreland, neighbor, when you look at Westmoreland, neighbor, I tell you, neighbor, something serious is going on down there in Westmoreland, neighbor. And if it don't get fixed, neighbor, we got a problem, neighbor. Westmoreland, neighbor, I don't think Westmoreland, and this is no disrespect to the persons living in Westmoreland, neighbor, but I think the Westmorelandites, neighbor, are still living under that 18.5 years. They're still manifesting their 18.5 years of the PNP, neighbor. I think it has a psychological effect on that parish, neighbor. And case in point why I think so, neighbor, the Prime Minister himself, who served majority of that 18.5 years, neighbor, is directly from Westmoreland. So I can safely say, neighbor, that I don't think Westmoreland is in 2026. I think Westmoreland is still in 2001, 1999 in that region. I think they are somewhere in that year, neighbor. I don't think these guys realize, neighbor, where Jamaica is and the advancement that this country has made and where persons want their life to go. Westmoreland, neighbor, is disappointed all of us from a political standpoint. I'm disappointed in Westmoreland, neighbor. And I don't even want to talk too much on Westmoreland, neighbor, because I don't want to feel like I'm bashing my fellow citizens, neighbor. But sometimes, neighbor, we have to talk, and I'm disappointed in persons along there in Westmoreland. Whether you support the Jamaica Labour, some persons who support the Jamaica Labour Party and didn't come vote, and persons who continue, who rent and brought in by the People's National Party, neighbor. Even a blind man could see that the PNP was going to win this election. So I don't know why you choose three persons from the opposition side for your parish. What kind of development you really want? You don't want a development. You want a handout. The $20 million that the government donate to the CDF, that will not depend on to give the people them 5,500 and 10,000. Yeah, but it was a shame and embarrassment and Westmoreland. And I think next one I need a whole solidarity parish, a solidarity parish neighbor. It doesn't need not a solidarity program. Westmoreland is a solidarity parish neighbor. And we think we should stand in solidarity with them because they need help.
They need help. But you know, Scratchy, the solidarity program is for all parishes. So the thing is that is this a reflection of the needs in Westmoreland that almost every one of them had to come out for this $20,000? Almost every resident in Westmoreland came out.
And I'm going to tell you, to neighbor, it is definitely a reflection of the need. And if the solidarity program, neighbor, remains the same as how it was launched, neighbor, I don't think it is something that every single one qualifies for, neighbor.
No, they don't.
It's not something that every single one qualifies for, neighbor. I think it's persons who might be considered indigent to a certain level, neighbor.
But are not getting any other help from any other source.
Yes, persons who are not a part of the formal system, so they don't, the social, yes, certain social programs miss them, neighbor, because they don't have any ID, they don't have any birth paper. Those are the persons who the solidarity program is for, neighbor. It's not just for every single person. So I don't know what happened to these persons in Westmoreland, neighbor. They look like they need I tell you, neighbor, it's a solidarity parish. And we must stand in solidarity with them.
Yeah. The Gleaner is reporting that they had to call off the program, Scratchy, because of the amount. And then, Scratchy, they would have been so misinformed that it almost appears as if the people do not even know what is happening, Scratchy. What a woeful thing. I heard you said earlier that you don't want to talk much about it, Scratchy, but it's heartbreaking, you know.
Neighbor, definitely heartbreaking, neighbor, and it was purposely, I can tell you, neighbor, that this thing that you see happening down there in Westmoreland, neighbor, it was orchestrated, neighbor, and planned by the 3 PNP member of parliament, neighbor. They wanted this. They didn't want to share the right information to tell persons that his Aunt Jane and Uncle Bro up the side alone qualifies. Not every single person in the community qualifies. They wanted it, neighbor. These guys believe that they want to show a point that, yes, we want everybody to get the money. So they want the government now. They want to just soon see it. You soon hear Mr. Campbell and one of them so that they're asking for some special treatment for the solidarity program towards Westmoreland and the affected areas. You soon hear it, neighbor. I can guarantee you, you're going to hear them come with it tomorrow or sometime next week. It is coming, neighbor. So I think, neighbor, they know what they are doing, neighbor, because you could have explained this to the people, neighbor, and let them know who should benefit from this program, neighbor. And I can tell you that none of these three member of parliaments did that, neighbor. They wanted the chaos, neighbor. They wanted it to be carried out across the media, neighbor. They want the government to see it because they have the view that the government is sitting on a whack of cash. And they say, okay, there's a lot of people down here who want this and who want that, so just shoot out. That is what they're hoping for, neighbor.
Wow. I tell you, Scratchy, when I look at the Gleaner's front page and see people that have turned out for this, Scratchy, it is amazing. What is that? And I wonder, Scratchy, because if so many people are in need of this type of assistance, I mean, $20,000 is a little change, but not a lot of money at all, Scratchy. That's a way you give your girlfriend every day, eh?
I mean, you know, definitely, neighbor. But it goes far away, though, neighbor. Not to say it goes far away, you know?
Goes far away. But then it means that the entire parish is in poverty.
Neighbor, the entire parish of Westmoreland, neighbor, is in poverty. And that's why I made reference, neighbor, and tell you that Westmoreland is in 2001. Same condition that Jamaica was in 2001 financially, neighbor. If you look at Westmoreland from a Jamaican standpoint, neighbor, and a development standpoint, and everything that was affecting Jamaica 2001, neighbor, it is still affecting Westmoreland alone as a parish right now, neighbor. They are embedded in handouts, neighbor. It's embedded in them, neighbor. freeness is embedded in them, neighbor. It's all about they don't like run if you know they drink junk batty rum down there, neighbor. It is embedded in them, neighbor, with water. And they love these little corner bars with them and the member of parliament, neighbor. If you're a member of parliament who go down there have some form of religious believer or some form of health thing and you don't subscribe to rum and water, they will never support you. And that is why they voted out neighbor the Jamaica Labour Party the last time, because the Jamaica Labour Party wasn't a junk batty and water party, neighbor. These guys were to bring substance here. These guys wanted to bring roads and development too, no. And they chose man who come eat up in a bar with you know and drink junk batty rum. A man who can come roll out and par with you know and yeah, and I'm crooks and I go on like him a normal regular citizen for sure likes it and I go on. That them vote for neighbor. That them vote for you. Neighbor Marty Perkins said, you spread the bed, you lay in it.
Wow.
Westmoreland is gonna I don't understand, and I'm sorry, I'm not being. You have to be political sometimes. I'm no politician neighbor. I'm a political activist. Westmoreland, you spread your bed, you lay in it. I don't have to come here and try to be politically correct. I am not a politician. I am a political activist, and I stand with my party and my government. So I don't need to be politically correct like more. Pick up, you know, Westmoreland voted badly the last election. That's what I'm going to say.
All right. Scratchy, coming back to you. Are you there?
Neighbor.
Yeah, Scratchy. Mr. Golding was on the Perspective the other night with Perry, and Perry said to him that he almost called him prime minister because the callers, the people in the comments, were referring to him as prime minister. So they were saying Prime Minister Golding and that he was the integrity boss. I find it amazing, Scratchy, that Mr. Golding did not correct that. You know, if someone calls you prime minister as the opposition leader, don't you think it appropriate for you to, in the spirit of patriotism and national unity, say, well, I thank you for the kind aspirations, but I just wanted to be clear that I am not the prime minister. Mr. Holness is, and while we aspire for that, we can only have one prime minister at a time. Don't you think that would be statesmanly?
Definitely, neighbor. That would be statesmanly, but unfortunately, neighbor, Mr. Golding is not a statesman, neighbor.
He's not a statesman.
Not a statesman, neighbor.
And the examples of him not being a statesman, Scratchy, you have any?
I mean, definitely, neighbor. When you look at a statesman, neighbor, not just anyone, not everyone can be branded as a statesman, neighbor. A statesman, neighbor, is someone, neighbor, where first thing, neighbor, your appearance, neighbor, says a lot about you as a statesman, neighbor. And I think I'm not someone who admire me or any form of man, neighbor. I don't admire man. But I'm not blind either. You get me? And I can safely say that, neighbor, that the opposition leader, neighbor, you know, he carry himself, neighbor. He doesn't carry himself to be worded as a statesman, neighbor. He's more of the chaka boss, you know? He's more of a chaka type of individual, neighbor. Not to disrespect him or anything, but it's just the reality, you know? When you look at the prime minister now, you could say the prime minister is a statesman, neighbor. The prime minister is definitely a statesman, neighbor. And someone who I would definitely call another statesman, neighbor, is Mr. Nigel Clark. You know, neighbor, it's not a lot of persons, even though we have 63 members of parliament, because you're in the parliament, neighbor, that doesn't necessarily equate to you being a statesman, neighbor. Statesman is someone, neighbor, you have to have some form of decorum, neighbor, some type of style, leadership qualities and style, neighbor. And persons, neighbor, must look up to you to a certain level. And you must be able, neighbor, to stand and be corrected. But whenever you see persons in the wrong, you correct them. And unfortunately, neighbor, Mr. Golding doesn't fit any of that, neighbor, to be called a statesman, neighbor.
Yeah, I just thought that it would have been nice if he corrected that moment, because you know it's important.
It would have been, of course, it would have been nice. It would have been nice. I know you, a man like you, neighbor. You know statesman, and you aspire to some form of accountability, responsibility, and professionalism. So I know you would have looked at him different and give him some kudos if you had heard that come from him.
Oh yes, absolutely. You know, Nelson Mandela emphasized the leading with a focus on the entire nation, you know, prioritizing reconciliation over narrow partisan interests. In his 1994 inauguration speech, he said The time for the healing of the wounds has come. The moment to bridge the chasm that divides us has come. There's a sense you get, Mr. Scratchy, that Golden has not recovered from September 3, has not moved on at all.
Definitely not, neighbor. Before I go to that, neighbor, I remember, neighbor, the PNP had a leader, neighbor, a prime minister too. And in the heights of that prime minister, neighbor, all type of things be called on his name, neighbor. When Jamaica was saying Chichiman, when that was directed towards the prime minister, neighbor. I remember, neighbor, during that time, neighbor, that prime minister was visiting my constituency, neighbor. And I remember, neighbor, we were told and warned, neighbor, not to bring any form of disrespect to him while he's here.
Yes. Yes.
We were told, neighbor, and warned not to disrespect the prime minister about any of those things when time him come here.
Yes.
And nobody did do it, neighbor. So that is some form of respect, neighbor. So the next point, neighbor, is to Mr. Mark Golding, neighbor, recovering from September 3rd, neighbor. Definitely, neighbor, his second last local government election a year before, coming to a general election, neighbor, last. The first opposition leader we have ever seen, neighbor, who tout himself and beat his chest high, neighbor, for someone who gained 14 seats or gained 28 seats in an election, neighbor, without gaining victory. We have never seen that before, neighbor. Probably the first opposition in the world, if not just Jamaica, neighbor. I've never seen that, neighbor. First opposition leader again, neighbor, I see as a loser, neighbor, who continue to taunt and talk about the amount of persons who support him at the polls, neighbor. I have never seen that, neighbor. Maybe Mr. Trump alone, I have seen that when he lost to Biden in the last general election, in the United States, in an election. So definitely, neighbor, and not a wonderful person for it to be comparing the neighbor. No, don't take any form of credit when I compare you to that person. Yeah, so definitely, neighbor. He's not at his best right now, neighbor.
Not at all. That's true. Good evening to you, Harry.
Good evening, neighbor. Scratchy Caroline, neighborhoods.
Had a great day.
A very eventful day, neighbor.
Have a very, very eventful day. Harry, you heard Mr. Dobney on the program last night, and I had to go back and listen a bit of what Mr. Dobney was saying. What Mr. Dobney is saying, Harry, is that the legacy is to be preserved, and the preservation of the legacy is of such importance that Jamaicans have linked their own aspirations into the Jamaica Labour Party remaining in power. And he was not sure that the party is totally aware of this, Harry. Do you think that the party is aware of how important it is for them to remain the administrations, how Jamaicans are depending on them, not only to preserve the legacy, but to take them forward?
I think because it's a two-part, neighbor. I think they know the people need them to remain in power, especially being that when they assess themselves, self-inspection and so on, and then do a comparison to the alternative, they would then see themselves as that's a better unit and team to bring Jamaica forward. I do know they have an idea, and I'll say just an idea, of how much the Jamaican people has placed on them, right? And as such, I don't think they've grasped the full picture just yet. And here's why I say that. If they did, neighbor, we would have seen a more on the front foot approach by its subsidiaries, the Young Jamaica, G2K. We would have also seen persons, whether it be member of parliaments, ministers, or so on, defending and ensuring that proper information is disseminated and distributed right throughout society, right? Because if it's something that it is priority, then you will do everything in your power to ensure that that is protected, that you also defend what is put out you will also debunk anything that goes against the advancement of the people which you are trying to do. So anything that stands in your way, neighbor, in achieving what is just and right for the people, you would have been on the front foot. What we got is somewhat of a laid back approach, almost like in a little comfort zone. And we know we just come out of election and we're dealing with Melissa Relief. But the truth is, what you're up against is also challenging our democratic process. And as such, that shows up the magnitude of what you're up against, which means you can't take it lightly. In fact, this situation that we're in demands more from the party and its administration than any other party in the past, any other administration in the past. Because now what you've done is you have created a new norm for the people, which is a higher standard, which you have to deliver on, at least meet and then exceed. And also you have to deal with those who are trying to tear down that very standard to gain back power. And based on that magnitude, neighbor, of what you're up against, I would want to see a more front foot approach, one that is a little bit more aggressive to stamp out certain things. You don't let things fester or let things breed, because as much as you know what you have in reserve and as resource, the truth is you don't know how people will take that on. In fact, you don't know how much people will almost have a second guessing of the hope because of this misinformation and so on. And as such, you want to ensure you stamp that out. You don't let it get any breathing space. But we're not getting that, neighbor. And as such, I don't think they truly grasp that is not just their legacy that needs to be protected, but they have several generations banking on them. And those sacrifices that generation has made, inputting the trust and responsibility on the backs of Andrew Holness and his administration, that is also something that needs to be protected. And the people themselves have placed everything they have on them to protect the legacy of the party, the legacy of the administration, and also the very legacies, because the people have made the sacrifice, neighbor. I know that for sure. And as such, they're expecting a deliverance on a whole different scale. And you can't allow your armor or even your first line of defense to be non-existent. And that's what's been happening since this Melissa thing. And we've seen, where the leader has come out and delivered some telling blows, but it is not enough based on what they're going up against. So I think they have to regroup. They have to look at the situation itself and become what the situation demands. They can't become, they can't be what they used to, right? Because this is a whole different situation. And I can tell you, a man is a man based on what the situation demands of him, neighbor. And as such, a team and an administration has to become something different when everything is at stake. And right now, Jamaica and their advancement is very much at stake.
He said, Harry, that wholeness will become better. And that forced me today to go back and look at wholeness, now, vis-a-vis what he was known of. You know a little bit about leadership too, Harry. Do you think that Mr. Dobney is onto something when he said, look out for wholeness becoming better? Because many feel that he is just on top of his game. What would be those measuring parameters that would outline that he's better?
I think one of the major things, neighbor, would be his ability to adapt. Remember, we're going through the characteristics of the leaders. And Mr. Holness has shown that he can become.
Thanks, Caroline.
For people.
He can become what? I didn't get that.
And that's done.
No. Harry, Harry broke up there. No. Hold on. Sort out your phone there for me, Harry.
Hearing me, neighbor?
Yes. I wasn't hearing you for about
Right.
half
So
a
I was
minute.
saying. Oh, okay. I was saying that Mr. Holness has shown to the people that he's very adaptable, right? And I
Yes.
think Mr. Dobney would have that level of understanding to see it happen. Of course, he's a senior for a person like me and Scratchy, so he would have seen a lot of leadership, and better able to assess what he has seen and to judge the level or the status that Mr. Holness is and how much more he has left in the tank.
Yes.
Also adding to, they meet and they know some things that is in the balance that we may not. But the truth is, you don't bluff in a poker game like this when so much is at stake. And as such, Mr. Holness shows that he's not a bluffer. He delivers. He states what he's putting on the table. He will defend what is on that table. And in fact, he'll raise you one. And I think Mr. Dobney knows very well about that. And also, with the many things, and this is why I chose adaptable, is that in order to be a leader, you can't be static. You have to go through a lot of times, even in silence, a metamorphosis, a change, a huge transformation. Because the more the responsibility gets, the larger it is. Because more people are now placing their aspirations on him, and he has to strap that on his back with his administration. And because the standard has also been raised, he knows, like a caterpillar neighbor goes into that cocoon to change, to transform. He has to constantly do that to maintain and improve the nation and the very people. And as such, to ensure that after emerging from that cocoon, neighbor, he can fly and bring life to the very aspirations and dreams of the people.
Today, Harry, I thought about, do you think that the typical Jamaica understands where Holness is taking them?
Well, I can tell you this, neighbor. They know where they want to go, right? And as such, a lot of times the people themselves are limited in the vision because you can't see everything, but you can trust the process. And that is where true leadership comes into play. Because as a leader, you have to take and understand what the people has put in front of you, right? And because he also have that vast experience and knowledge base and also forward thinking, he will not only nurture what has been given to him, but find ways to multiply it. And as such, the limited view or perspective of the common man, of Jamaicans, he can advance that. And as such, he would know where he can and even surprise himself at times, right? And the truth is, when he does that and communicate it to the people, they go back to the drawing board, neighbor, and bring new dreams and aspirations. So now he has widened their scope, their and horizon. And as such, they're going to ask for more. And the more he delivers is the more they're going to request, because growth, transformation, and advancement does not stop as humans. And as such, Mr. Holness can communicate. And this is why we're big on the communication aspect. You want every single person to aspire in a way where it scares them. Because dreams, neighbor, when you have them, they're saying that if it doesn't scare you, it's not big enough. And when you look at where Jamaica is coming from, neighbor, how we've been thwarted, right? We've been set aside and set back for several generations. And you look at it now being exposed to where other countries are, for example, Singapore. We're a few generations behind the Singapore. And you look at it as a common man and a Jamaican citizen to say, but we could have been that. No. And they look at that neighbor and say, listen, that is what we want to deliver. But then after achieving that, we want more. We want to see Jamaica being not just the pride of the Caribbean, but challenging being the pride of the West. And those are serious dreams of even the common man, because they know if Jamaica becomes that, they don't have to worry as to what their standard of living will be. And that is a task, that is a responsibility, and the ongoing challenge that Mr. Holness has to deliver on.
Okay, now you don't feel though that somehow there has to be a collective foresight that is communicated nationally, so that more people can recognize the path that the country is on. And you know, you speak of communication and milestones, but somehow I think that there is a divide in Jamaica where one side sees the country going in one direction or based on one vision, and another side sees another vision. It's almost like there are two visions, and so there becomes two competing forces. And I'm asking whether or not we can't agree at this time, Harry, that somehow the path that is we are on is the better path, and that more and more people need to support this path, which is non-political, is the path for Jamaica's advancement, is the path for Jamaica's development. And Holness happens to be the best choice to lead the nation towards economic independence. I wonder if you understand what I'm saying.
I do, neighbor, but here's the thing. To have that value consensus, right, among a nation that has a high level of tribalistic behaviors or tendencies still in our culture, is very hard to get. Not impossible, for sure, because we've seen improvements, great improvements at that, based on where we're coming from. But the truth is, neighbor, the two opposing views or forces, they actually do want the same thing, but they want it being done in a different way. So the medium is what they're really not agreeing on.
What is the PNP's vision? Where is the path that they have outlined for you? Could you help us with that? Where is the path for the when you ask the PNP, what is your plan for Jamaica? Are you able to tell me?
The thing with that, neighbor, because I've been asking the same question, because I didn't get much, for example, from the manifesto. And this is, the last election was, I'd say, my first year of deep diving into manifestos ever. And I didn't get substance from it. I got semi-promises. I saw unclear pathways. And as such, nothing was set for even people to understand how we would achieve them. But the thing about it is that the divide also have a different level of emotional intelligence and literacy level to it, neighbor. And as such, because we're not, that in itself is not egalitarian or ubiquitous right across the board. Yes. We don't understand it on the same level, and we may never. But the disparity is so far with the opposing views that they don't want to subscribe to understanding either. So, for example, supporters of the People's National Party, they will not want to hear what a Jamaica Labour Party person who is speaking to say, whether it is something in advancement or just anything overall, because they already have chosen side and say, listen, may I stick to this, right? No matter what you say, may I go stick to it. And that is what is causing the divide to be so wide and to impact negatively the value consensus that we truly need for them to actually achieve that advancement that they actually both want. So the thing with it is that what I've seen, there's a level of handout. I call it handoutism, right? Where one side would want that because they think that brings them a sense of ease. They can get things, they can move on in terms of with their life from there. But then the other side now say, listen, create the opportunities and I'll do the rest. So they both want a comfortable living and to be better. But the truth behind it is that in the short term, that's okay. But in the long term, you suffer because there's no true productivity in the first part that I mentioned. Because if you keep getting the likes of handouts and minimal contribution to your nation, then when those limited resources, and I'm heavy on the limited resources, gets depleted, what happens next? So you want the fun, the nice life, a place to live, raise family, and so on. But you're going about it the wrong way. And in order to have that consensus, you have to take a step back, make a conscious decision and an independent decision. I hear Mr. Perry say he's an independent thinker. And I want to put that to everybody. For you to be an independent thinker, you have to be willing to find information that hurts, that you don't agree with, but it makes sense. And as such, you have to then digest that information. And after doing that, neighbor, you make a conscious decision whether or not it was who you were. You have to become something new because the world doesn't say the same. And as such, I think the opposition persons and their followers don't want to go through that process, neighbor. So they want the end result without the work. And you and I know very well, and neighbors know very well, in order to get the result, you have to put in the work. And the work include sacrifices.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things, when we heard of the bad medicine, nobody wanted to do that. And it was a big thing. So you want the advancement, but don't want to make the sacrifice. And that is a problem regarding trying to get to that value consensus, which we need. It's a necessity for us to go forward.
Okay, so in the value concept within a competitive democracy, Harry, because we are going to have elections. Do you sense that the majority of Jamaicans have at this point accepted that the country is going in the right direction? Do you think that outside of the partisan divide, because comrades are going to be comrades, but do you think that the majority are supportive of the path Jamaica is now pursuing?
They have, neighbor. The vast majority have, because they have now been able to see the advancements that are there. They have enough years under their belt now to see what have happened, where they were and where they are now, and potentially where they want to be. And as such, they really have seen that they're etching closely to where they want to be. And while a lot of people may never openly say it, truthfully based on their actions, neighbor, if you look closely enough, you know they've bought into the direction that the country is going. But of course, not everybody, put it this way, not everybody are leaders, neighbor. You have very few leaders, and as such, people aren't open to say these things, especially if they are coming from the opposite view and have been transformed and reformed. They definitely won't be saying it, but they'll partake in all of the work and the fruits of that labor. So that is the thing with it, neighbor. And even the comrades, they know. Don't let them fool you. They know. They just rather to stick to what they want, and as such will ride out that storm. But I want to tell them the storm is going to be a hell of a one, because it's going to continue.
If I look at your theory, Harry, logically, you are saying to me that even though the democracy is divided, you expect the Wholeness administration to keep winning.
Definitely, neighbor. Right? And I've said this a few.
Them to keep winning.
As long as they haven't blundered, neighbor, towards the people, as long as they continue on the path that they are on, I think the people will continue to choose them, because they know that they have chosen Jamaica, and that is what the people want. Because the truth is, neighbor, you can't you should never ever choose somebody who don't choose you, or else you're going to be miserable for life. And that is what the Jamaica people is ensuring that they do. They want to choose somebody who puts them first. And that is the major thing why the opposition is out for 3 terms. Now, we know they need to do a lot of work to even come to the table and propose anything for the people. But the truth is, as long as this administration maintains these standards, neighbor, and keep pushing, keep looking for the improvement of the people, the things that the people want, and do it in a manner that ensures continuity, ensures growth, and ensure that Jamaica keep being a recognized, developed state, because we've made great advancement in that area. I think the people of Jamaica will ensure that as long as it serves them in the right way, they will continue to choose Mr. Holness and his administration.
Hold on. All right. So we're back at 27 minutes to 10 o'clock. And of course, we're going with you until 10 o'clock. Scratchy?
Yes, neighbor.
Momentum, Scratchy, is like a runaway train. And what I'm hearing from Scratchy is that the momentum is building for the party, that the party has created hope in the society, and therefore it will keep winning. But you can't take that for granted, Scratchy. There has to be the political alignment of the party, which is what Mr. Dobney is saying, that you could do as well as you want in government. At the end of the day, there is another side to this, Scratchy. And what Dobney brought out is that this side is not aligned sufficiently to deliver the results going forward. How would you comment on that?
I would definitely agree to an extent, neighbor, that no matter what you do as government, neighbor, and even to say, neighbor, we saw that in the last concluded general election, neighbor. And I think the last election, neighbor, I was waiting on this election. I told you that before in public and in private, that I was using this election to know as my case study going forward, neighbor.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I need to talk to you about that. Yeah, the lessons you learned coming out of 2025 in terms of the election.
Definitely, neighbor. So I was using 2025 election, neighbor, because as my case study, neighbor, my reason, neighbor, for using 2025 election, neighbor, it was one of our most advanced election, neighbor, and the most technically advanced of our time, neighbor. It was our election, neighbor, where we saw a government, neighbor, that has outperformed everything. We never seen government perform to that magnitude and that level before, neighbor. Yes. So I was using it, neighbor, and to agree with Mr. Dabney, neighbor, no matter what government does, neighbor, I think, yes, we perform wonderful as a government, neighbor, but I think we were lacking as a political party. And I would definitely agree, Mr. Dabney, that from a political party standpoint, neighbor, despite the Jeep, despite the increase in there and the increase over there, neighbor, presence, neighbor, is very important with momentum, with keeping momentum, neighbor. And yes. I know Jamaicans, and I often tell you that I study Jamaicans. I know Jamaicans believe, neighbor, that Jamaicans know, they know, understand, neighbor, that when the message is sent in a jacket and tie suit, neighbor, I tend to fly over a lot of Jamaicans' head, neighbor, compared to when this message is sent from a green polo t-shirt. So we have to understand, neighbor, that despite being government is important, neighbor, we must also remember that, neighbor, that it is the political party that form government. So political parties are just as important as government, neighbor, and the attention should be placed at political party, because when you're at government, neighbor, you're running things and you're making sure that everything is all right. If you don't have a political presence, neighbor, your base, neighbor, and persons who felt like they came out in whatever condition and gave you their support, neighbor, and these persons are not feeling you from a local level, neighbor, they're going to resent against the neighbor, and come next election, they might not go out in your support. Because whether you want to believe it or not, neighbor, there are persons, neighbor, I tell you, government don't play politics, but when persons on the ground receive whatever they receive, neighbor, they look at it from a political standpoint. So we have to understand, neighbor, within the climax of our country, political organizations are very important, neighbor, and I think the Jamaica Labour Party, neighbor, must understand that they have to keep a steady eye on the ground, neighbor, because we know the PNP, neighbor, they're in opposition, and being opposition neighbor, they're a bunch of 28 high-glass neighbor. They don't have nothing to do. They don't have no job. They don't have any mandate. They don't have no office to go to certain level. So these are 28 high-glass neighbor who can go in their constituency and sit in a rum bar for the whole day and the whole week, only turn up to parliament and do all type of mockery and gimmickry in the parliament and then go back to this. But compared to Jamaica Labour Party personal neighbor, these guys will government position neighbor, we're in a disaster. These guys are in meetings constantly, but despite that, they still have a constituency to run. So I think they must be able to create that balance neighbor. They must be creative neighbor where they can balance both the government and the political party. And I will love to see my political organization that I support going forward neighbor learn from 2025 neighbor and know that within the last majority of those constituencies from a political standpoint, we lost them from a party standpoint neighbor because the party itself, neighbor, was lacking in a lot of these constituencies. As Mr. Dabney said, we must be mindful of this going forward and know that no matter what we do, neighbor, the possibility still lie that we can be voted out, even with the malignant use of money that the opposition leader talk about, neighbor, which is something that is something, neighbor, that can deter the results as well. And I think, neighbor, 2025 was one of our election, neighbor, which is so sad, neighbor, where we didn't get to see the true result of the people's intention, neighbor, because of the malignant use of money, neighbor. Wow. And I think, yes, I think we didn't get to see the true potential of the people, neighbor. The people true intention didn't came out in 2025 election, neighbor, because of factors, neighbor, that caused person to either participate in the process.
And then they talk about holding being integrity boss, Scratchy. What rubbish?
Definitely, neighbor. I don't know what kind of integrity boss they can talk about when they call me. So that's why I tell Mr. Perry. What I find with Mr. Perry, neighbor, he's very theatric. A very theatric guy, neighbor. He's very gimmickry. And I want to say to Mr. Perry, you know, be careful, Mr. Perry, because I see, and this is, I hope him don't see this as a disrespect. I see Mr. Perry as a Damian Crawford 2.0 in the neighbor. I see Mr. Perry as a Damian Crawford 2.0.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
You know, he try, you know, the outspokenness, you know, they're articulate and coming up with the gimmickry and the style, you know. But he has to be careful, neighbor, because I think you have seen, neighbor, where Mr. Crawford, neighbor.
Youthful exuberance.
Youthful exuberance, neighbor, and it kind of want to be for a certain time, neighbor. But I mean, Mr. Perry, I would advise Mr. Perry to just create his own lane, his own image, neighbor, and definitely don't try to be a Damian Crawford 2.0.
That's true. No, Scratchy. One of the things that Dobney implied was that in the seats that the Labour Party lost, they seem to be absent. No, Scratchy, that cannot be a good strategy. You know, I heard Mr. Wright in Westmoreland Central saying that he needs to represent the party's interests in the seat. Scratchy, you can't leave these seats until election come around to crank them up.
Definitely, neighbor. That is very.
By that time, you may have lost the election.
Yes, neighbor, and I think that is what cost us a lot of these seats last time, neighbor. Candidacy, neighbor, decision making from the hierarchy, neighbor. The hierarchy, we should say that we definitely flag them from that, neighbor. They took a while, neighbor, to settle a lot of these constituencies, neighbor. And it lingered, neighbor. I think a lot of the good news and the good things, neighbor, that persons wanted to support the government in regards, neighbor. It lingered, neighbor, person that carry personal feeling because they didn't get the candidate of their choice. And it wasn't enough time, neighbor, to kind of bring back those persons into the fray and cheer them up. And so despite that, just come back in the same way we are one, neighbor, right? So those persons kept their grows, neighbor, and said that they weren't going to participate, neighbor. And I think it definitely affected us, neighbor. And I think going forward, neighbor, this is something that the genset, the hierarchy of the party, neighbor, must look at, neighbor, and make sure that the chairman, the genset, deputy genset, neighbor, make sure, neighbor, that a political organization, neighbor, we have persons in these constituencies. We should make sure that we have persons in these constituencies from now, neighbor, so that persons can familiarize themselves with these persons, neighbor, so that they can build that rapport and build that connection, so it don't be a transactional thing. Because, neighbor, once you're in a constituency for 4 or 5 years, person not going to look to you every day for 5,000, It's not going to be no transactional thing. But when you just come in and you come in with this hype and this worry, it's going to be a bit transactional. So the party, neighbor, must look at that, neighbor. And I think, again, neighbor, as I often said, neighbor, going forward, I would like the Jamaica Labour Party, neighbor, to be more strategic, neighbor, in how it elect its officer in terms of chairman, general secretary, deputy this or whatever, neighbor. Because when you look at government, neighbor, the same persons, neighbor, who hold those high position in the Jamaica Labour Party, decision-making position.
Busy men. Can't run party.
They are very busy men, neighbor. They can't run party. Our current General Secretary, neighbor, Mr. Harry Strong, is the Minister of Security. He's probably the Deputy Prime Minister. He has a lot on his plate. The Deputy now is a portfolio minister. So, neighbor, we have to be very strategic, neighbor. And I think, neighbor, what we need to look at, neighbor, is that persons who are part of this noble organization, neighbor, who understand the politics, neighbor. I think it's full time, neighbor, that we ask some of these persons, neighbor, to come play a role, neighbor, from a political party standpoint, neighbor. Neighbor, I often say this to the neighbor.
Yeah. Hold on a little bit. Hold on.
Okay, go ahead.
By the way, thinking out loud, why don't you come and let your voice be heard? We have a few minutes, could give you thinking out loud. When can we get someone to speak about both sides' shortcoming? Maybe you can. Would you mind to join us?